Hey everybody, the end of the school year is here. So I thought I would come on real briefly and just give you guys some tips of some things that you need to pay attention to. Now, some of you are already out of school, so don't freak out as I go over some of these things because as I'll talk about, you'll be able to integrate those when you get back after the summer break. But I did a training just, I don't know, a month or two ago, and I have this sheet, and I will put it here so that you'll be able to see it. But I'm gonna kind of go over that, and then you'll be able to download it. I'll give you a link to be able to download it or snap a picture of it. Actually, that might actually be easier. And so it's really just it says 5 things to think about as you prepare your child to transition out of this year and into the next one because it's super important to know some of this stuff because the time to be worried about school year isn't in October or November because by then the challenges they are already kind of set in. And I don't know about your kids, but mine, he, really had to hit the ground running because everything would kind of get established that first week of school. And so if you have a school that says, well, we're going to give it some time, we're going to wait until late October, November, run for the hills, that's never a good idea. You give a kid, especially kids with behaviors, like 6 weeks for the behavior just to kind of get embedded is going to take you 6 months to get rid of it, right? And when we talk about inclusion, you don't want to wait on that either. So I'm just going to kind of go over a few things. So first thing I want you guys to do is look at your IEPs. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, I have an IEP. I go to the IEP meetings. I know. I know what it says. But I have to tell you, I look at a lot of IEPs and I notice things that I will point it out to the parent who was there during that meeting. And they're like, I don't remember that happening. I have one like now I'm working with where physical therapy was removed from her IEP, and the school even did a notice of proposal to remove that service. And the mom thought that the service had continued. That was like a year ago. So her son had been without that service for a year because she didn't know. Because you guys know you're in that meeting, it goes fast. There's lots of things happening. People are talking. Maybe you're in the room, or maybe you're not in the room. Maybe you're online, and then it gets really confusing. So I do encourage you to show up physically for your IEP meetings because I was at an IEP this morning, and somebody asked me if I was attending meetings in person or online or what I was doing more of, and almost all of my meetings now are back in person because there is a huge difference of what happens at the table when you are sitting there. So I really encourage you to physically be there in the space. So I want you to read over your IEP and try to read it as a person who's not the parent to see, does this describe your kid? Are the services there that they need? Is the focus on what you think the focus should be on? Right? You need to pay attention to those kind of things. So the present level of performance, that's those paragraphs to talk about who your kid is. It needs to describe who they are. They don't need to be really long. And actually, I don't like when they're really long because just like the parent input section, if you write really long present levels or really long parent inputs even, they ain't nobody reading it. So I want you to document what needs to be in there. But there are a lot of things that, are kind of like fluff, if you will. You definitely need data. So assessment scores, and I'm not talking about FAST. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real assessments, the diagnostic assessment of reading, the test of early mathematical abilities. There's a plethora of different assessment materials. I think I have on my website, I think there's a blog there on assessments. So if you go to stacyhoagland.com and go to the blog, you should be able to find an article there on different assessment materials. As it needs to be meaningful. And personally, I don't like really any assessment that is computer-based, unless you happen to have a kid, which is not very common with the IEP meetings that I go to, being effective. But yeah, okay, so there are some kids who do better on computers, but I don't find that in general. When it comes to reading comprehension, what I find kids doing on a computer is going click, 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 click. I'm done. I click submit, because in their heads, the assignment is to be able to get through it, not to go slow and read for meaning and work out those word problems on the math assessment. And so I encourage you to ask for in-person, like human to human, math and reading assessments. The STAR and iReady, those are computer-based. So I don't really care for those either. But you want to look at those, see if you do have the assessments, those assessments on your IEP. You want to kind of, hopefully you have an idea as to like, if it seems like it's actually representative of your kid, right? All right. Your parent input. So you're going to write detailed parent input. You want to make sure that that's in there, but don't go on for 2 pages. Mine would go on for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 paragraphs. It wasn't really a lot. But anything that you're doing outside of school, you want to put in there. If you are sending a registered behavior technician into school with your kid, you're going to document that in there. And then you want to include the assessment data, like I said, that should be in there. It shouldn't be, I read an IEP today, actually, where the present level was just copy and paste from an evaluation. Well, what do the teachers have to say? How does the kid do in the classroom? I want that information in there as well, because a lot of times I don't really care what the IQ score is. That's like not always very relevant to me. I want to know how they are in the classroom. Are they raising their hand? Are they participating? Are they getting their work done? Do they need support? All that stuff. And let me also say that if you have a child who needs to be in a classroom that's supported, meaning that there is a paraprofessional in the room, you need to make sure that their needs are clearly documented. Because what will happen if it's not, even if the school submits what's called the financial assistant packet, which is to get money from the districts to help provide paraprofessionals in classrooms. If the district sees these IEPs that sound like kids doing okay, they don't really need a lot of support, then they're not going to get approved. So sometimes it's not even that the school didn't try, but the district is going to go by, what does it say? What does it tell us are the needs of the student? So you want to make sure that it's clear. You always want to be thinking inclusion. And I don't care who the student is or what their level of disability is, what their challenge is, it doesn't really matter to me. Some of the most visually complex students, and what I mean by that is when you look at them, you see the behaviors. Maybe they're physical, their needs are physical, they use a wheelchair to get around. Maybe they require a lot of visuals when they are transitioning from one place to another. Maybe they use a communication device. Maybe they have a disability like Down syndrome where you can see it. Some of those kids actually are the best candidates for inclusive education. And it tells us right in IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the governing law of the land when it comes to special education and your rights. It says right in there that teams should always be considering education in what's called the least restrictive environment. That is a regular education classroom to the maximum extent appropriate, right? Because some kids need to have specialized instruction. So I'm not saying that a kid should just be put in a regular classroom and not get special education. That's not. One does not preclude the other. Every student needs to be looked at as an individual. That's the I in your IEP. And there shouldn't be any talk at your meetings like, well, this is what we do with those students. That type of statement is the kiss of death. So you want to, that's a big red flag and should be warning you of something. So watch for that. You got to be cautious of the ready dilemma. So that is, oh, we love Johnny. He's such a wonderful student. And, he's so popular here at school. And we want him to be included too. And soon as he's ready, we're going to do that. We're never going to be ready. It is not about the kid getting ready. These are children. It's about the staff getting ready. Because good inclusive education is not easy. It's a lot harder than putting a kid in a special ed classroom, for sure. And so you can ask them, well, it's not really about him getting ready. It's about you guys getting ready. So what are you doing to get ready? And let me tell you, if you guys are waiting for your kid, I don't know, to magically transform into somebody that they're not in order to get what they're legally entitled to receive, um, you could be waiting their entire education, because the curriculum does not get easier. Every year it gets more and more difficult. So what also tends to happen is the gap between so-called typical development, like when we throw it up there on standardized assessments, and child with a disability, oftentimes the gap does widen. It doesn't mean the student's not making progress, but the gap does tend to widen for certain types of children with certain types of disabilities. Do not let that be your litmus test of should a student be included in regular education. Let me also say, do not sit in these meetings and say, well, I want him or her included because I want them to learn social skills. Regular education is academic. Those days of even kindergarten, like where they used to have like the little house area where you'd go and you'd learn how to, like, you know, play house, right? And cook on the little stove and do all that fun stuff that we did when I was a kid. It's gone. They don't do that anymore. So you need to make sure that you know that. So don't go into these meetings asking for inclusion because of social stuff. Not that that's not a really good reason. You know, we want our kids to have social role models. So that's a good reason, but it is not going to get you in there. What you want is you want your child to have access to the standardized curriculum. And the best place for that to happen is going to be in the regular classroom. Because even when they tell you that in a special ed classroom, they are getting that exposure, ask for the schedule of the day. Ask to see what your kid's doing from 8 to 8:15, from 8:15 to 8:45, and so forth. When you look at that schedule, you're going to see a lot of things on there if your kid is in a special ed classroom that are not academic. And a lot of time will be spent on a computer, because the observations that I've done the last 2 years, especially, I go into these classrooms and half the class is sitting on a computer. And these are kids that should be getting, as per their IEP, intensive instruction, but they're in front of a computer. So you want to look for that. And let's see, oh, behavior. So if behavior is the barrier to inclusive education, then there should be a behavior plan. So if that's your kid and your school saying, well, yeah, we're going to include him when he's ready because he's got all these behaviors and he's hitting kids and throwing things. All right, where's my functional behavior assessment? Where's my positive behavior intervention plan? What are you guys doing to make it better? There should be a plan, and that plan needs to be documented. In your IEP, there's a section that says behavior needs. That box, the yes box, should be checked. And there's another little box that talks about if there's a behavior plan, if there's a functional behavior assessment. So look at that page and see if those boxes are checked. Okay, all right. You want to ask questions. So this is like, even like you could do this, you could do it now, but you could also wait until like that week before school and talk to your school. Personally, I always had meetings for my son with his teacher before the week before school started. And I recognize they're really busy, but that was really important to me. And so if it's really important to you, you just tell them it's going to be brief, but you need to have a meeting. You just don't feel good about it. But you want to ask questions. So you want to find out things like, even if you are transitioning to a new school, it's really scary, right? You don't know the school, your kid doesn't know the school. So if that's your kid, go visit over the summer. You want to go see the school, have them tour the school. You can call in advance, talk to administration and say, my kid's going to need some warm-up time. So we want to come over a couple times over the summer, walk the halls. But the questions that you're going to ask are things like, what is your adult to student ratio, especially in the special ed classrooms? Because there's a wide expanse there. I've seen some classrooms, they got like 5 kids. And now I will say that normally when you have like 5 kids, you got 5 pretty complex kids that need a lot of support. It could be fluky and it just happens, you know, boundaries and kids in that area. It could be something like that. But a lot of times when you only have 5 kids in the class, it's because they're high level intense needs. And then I've seen other classrooms that got like 15 kids, 2 adults, and that could be a recipe for disaster depending upon the students are in there. So you want to ask that question. What curriculum are they using? Again, there's some really good alternate, like additional. So if your kid is going into regular education, that's where they're going to get the traditional, the state standardized curriculum that everybody's getting. Going to get that there. But in special education, which is meant to give your kids what they need so that they could be successfully included in regular ed, there should be a specialized curriculum in there. It shouldn't be what everybody else is using. And it should be the curriculum that is in line the best with how your kid thinks and learns. So ask which curriculum they're using and then do a little shopping online, and poke around and see what, now not shopping, I guess that was the wrong word. Not shopping like I want you to go buy something. I want you to go surfing. There we go. Surfing around and finding information about that program and seeing if it's something that you think is in line with the way that your kid thinks. If you don't understand the way that your kid thinks, maybe it's time for you to ask for a psychoeducational evaluation, because that is really, in my head, the main reason that we do evaluations. You want to look to see, how does your kid process? How do they learn? You also want to do them because you want to make sure they are actually learning, because nobody should be flatlined. And again, I don't care the impact of their disability. Every kid should be learning if they're going to school, because if they're not learning, it's just daycare. So you want to make sure they're learning. How long is the teacher instruction? A lot of times in special ed classrooms, especially like our cluster programs, there's something called teacher time. And that is where the students are sitting. Sometimes it's one-on-one, or like 2-on-1, sometimes 3, but it's usually really like a small group like that, where they're working with the teacher. And how long is it? Because again, on the IEP, it says intensive instruction. So if it's only 15 minutes a day, I don't know about you, but I don't like consider that intensive. Just me. But if that's you, how's your kid gonna learn a new skill in 15 minutes when they have these complex needs and they're in special education to get intensive instruction? All right, so now you want to understand what's called the continuum of services, especially for those of you out there who are going from either preschool to kindergarten, 5th grade to 6th grade, or 8th grade to 9th grade, right? You're making the change, the big change in the school. The schools have to look at so the receiving schools has to look at, okay, what are we going to do with this kid? How are we going to give them what they need when what we have here is a little bit different? So if you have a kid, for instance, who is coming out of a cluster, so it could be an autism cluster, intellectual disability cluster, the emotional behavior program in elementary schools, and you're going up into middle school and they're not going into a specialized program. So they're on standards, they're on regular standards. They're going to be going into regular ed classes. That is a massive change for a kid to come out of a special program and go into regular ed. So you want to be asking, how are you guys going to meet their needs? What's going to happen? What's it going to look like? What are you going to do for my kid? What is the continuum of services here at this school? Because they're good IEP teams can get very creative. They can come up with all kinds of really good suggestions about how to meet a kid's needs. But sadly, if the parent is not applying a little pressure there, because, oh, well, we're going to figure it out when something bad happens. If kid starts having behaviors because they're frustrated and they're throwing things on the floor, they're refusing to come in the classroom, then we'll address it. That's not good. It's not good for a bunch of reasons, but one of the reasons is if they're in regular ed and they're refusing to come in the classroom, all those kids inside that classroom are going to be looking at your kid who's refusing to come in the room. That is not going to be good for them socially, emotionally. And so as much as we can get in front of that stuff, you want to. You don't want to wait for bad things to happen. So there's different types. So there's direct services, and you can have direct services in middle school and in high school. What I mean by that is like specialized instruction in reading, specialized instruction in math, and et cetera. A lot of times schools will tell you, well, you know, it's different here. We don't do that. Yeah, if your kid needs it, yes, they can. Gets a little tricky, but it can happen. Same thing with well, collaboration. Collaboration is a really good one actually, because that's a support facilitator who is a special educator who kind of floats around. Sometimes they push into a regular class and help the kids within that classroom. Sometimes they pull them out. They should be monitoring the kids' performance. So if your kid is getting behind in certain things, they should be able to pull them and say, oh, okay, let's see, take a look at your grades. What's going on? So that support should be there. And then there's consultation, which is the teacher to teacher consult, where that teacher is helping the classroom teacher in identifying, some skills about how to teach your kid, right? And then of course you have occupational therapy, speech therapy, language therapy, physical therapy, counseling, nursing, and all that stuff. So all those services need to follow your child. I will also say that I see a lot of times kids have a pretty nice chunk of language therapy in 5th grade, and then they're told, well, this is middle school, we only do it once a week. So that's no. If your kid didn't change and they still need the service, they still need the service. So don't let a movement in where they physically sit within the school system to be the reason for reducing the service. If you think it's appropriate, then you do it. But unless the kid has made all this progress and they've mastered their goals and things are good and the needs that they have are a lot less, then no, they need to continue with service. All right. And then you want to secure assistive technology. So, and what I mean by that is if your kid uses a communication device, if they even use like a pencil grip or a specialized scissors that have the self-opening but spring-loaded scissor, a certain type of laptop, maybe a touch screen, visual magnification, all types of different devices and systems that your kid might need. Make sure that goes on with them to the next school, especially if you're changing schools. If you're changing classrooms, yeah, you still gotta be concerned about that. But I've seen a lot of times where kids will go the first couple of weeks of school without the stuff that they needed that helped them become successful in the prior environment. So you want to make sure that those things transfer onto them. Because those things were established, the team all got together and you decided these are the things that your child needs in order to be successful. So you want to make sure those are in place. All right. So the other thing that you can work on over the summer is something called the Day in the Life, which is a 1-pager, preferably. Not, if you have to go over to 2, okay, but try to keep it to 1, of who your kid is, what they need, what makes them tick. Teachers that I've talked to and that my son had, they love that because it gives them a step up. And I've actually had my own son's teachers when he was in school tell me that they really didn't understand an IEP. So when you're talking about general educators, really can't depend upon them to really sometimes even read the IEP, as sad as that is for me to say. So you gotta read it. You have to know your rights. You have to be prepared. You have to help your kid get prepared. So I hope that as you kind of come in the home stretch here of this year, that you will take a look at your IEP, email the school, making sure that these things are in place, that the transfer of all these goodies are going to move with them to the next environment. Be part of the process. Do not ever skip an IEP meeting. Don't let schools have IEP meetings without you there. You are your child's best advocate. And I don't care if you think that you have a great advocate, they're never going to be who you are, ever. The only person that has everything to gain or to lose, other than your child, is you in the decisions that are made at those IEP tables. So don't skip them. Be a voice for your child because they need you there more and more every year. All right, guys. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful summer. Family Network on Disabilities, I think I'm going to try to put some trainings together over the summer. So just keep an eye on that. And so if you live in Broward, you'll be able to tap into hopefully some of the good stuff that we'll have coming down the road on that, and have fun. Get your kids into some good stuff this summer. Okay. All righty. Talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.